Welcome to the 2018 AP Language and Composition FRQ for Rhetorical Analysis. Now, one thing that I want to point out before we get started is that this is a rather lengthy excerpt, so go ahead and look. This is the first page and then the second page. Now, you don't have the time to carefully annotate every single little bit and piece when you're actually in the test-taking situation. I take a little bit more time simply so that you see me model some things that you might look for that might have stood out to you, or maybe some things that you wouldn't have caught, so that you can learn those skills before you're actually in the test-taking situation. I also caution you guys to take what I'm giving you and combine that with what you are learning in your AP classes. Some of you are going to have AP teachers that teach chunking, for example. And when you're given a lengthy excerpt, chunking might be a good idea. Some of you might be sitting there thinking, what is chunking? Chunking would mean that you literally divide a passage or excerpt into chunks, and then you just make a few annotations for the chunk as a whole. So let's say this might be my first chunk, this would be my second chunk, and then this last part would be my third chunk. And as I'm chunking, I might look for what rhetorical devices are being used, what might be the tone, maybe any structural shifts, and where her appeals seem to be focused. Those are just some ideas, okay? Just more information before we actually get started. Okay, so for this prompt, it reads, in 1997, then United States Secretary of State Madeleine Albright gave the commencement speech to the graduating class of Mount Holyoke College, a women's college in Massachusetts. Read the following excerpt from her speech carefully, then write a well-developed essay in which you analyze the choices Albright makes to convey her message to the audience. So again, in the later years of the AP, we are really starting to see this more often, where we're told her message or his point or her point. And it's purposefully ambiguous because it's an additional test in your ability to discern what the rhetoric means. So we definitely want to, when we're done going through, have an idea of what her message actually is, so that way we can phrase a very direct and specific thesis when we start drafting our response. Okay, so let's go ahead and start. As individuals, each of us must choose whether to live our lives narrowly, selfishly, and complacently, or to act with courage and faith. Check it out. 3 lines and so much already. She opens by challenging her audience. They have to make a decision how they're going to live their lives. She uses a lot of diction here, and specifically that diction is juxtaposed to create sort of an either or. Are you going to live this way, or are you going to live that way? Okay. As a nation, America must choose whether to turn inward and betray the lessons of history, or to seize the opportunity before us to shape history. Today, under the leadership of President Clinton, America is making the right choice. So this seems rather broad. We've gone from individual choice to national choice. The Berlin Wall is now a memory. We could be satisfied with that. Instead, we are enlarging and adapting NATO and striving to create a future for Europe in which every democracy, including Russia, is our partner, and every partner is a builder of peace. So we definitely have some logos, some historical evidence, the allusion to the Berlin Wall being a memory. This might be interesting as we go on. Let's continue. Largely because of US leadership, nuclear weapons no longer target our homes. We could relax. Instead, we are working to reduce nuclear arsenals further, eliminate chemical weapons, end the child-maiming scourge of landmines, and ratify a treaty that would ban nuclear explosions forever. Okay, you probably heard some repetition there, but let's go ahead and note that. We have a statement followed by we could this, instead that. We could this, and we're going to have instead that. And in fact, if we look ahead just a little bit, we could instead, and we could instead. All right, I'm going to stop there. I'm not sure if there's any in the next paragraph or not, but we have this catalog, right, which is a list. And we are using some parallelism to pit what we could do, the hypothetical, versus reality, okay? So what we are doing versus what we could be doing. And that's going to be really interesting because it's going to exemplify the power of choice. And that, my friends, actually directly connects, let's put a little star there in a different color so you can see. This choice is what we opened with. We opened with this possibility of choice, all right? So she's definitely maintaining the theme here. All right, back to where we were. The fighting in Bosnia has stopped. We could turn our backs now and risk renewed war. Instead, we are renewing our commitment and insisting that the parties meet theirs to implement the Dayton Accords. And we are backing the War Crimes Tribunal because we believe that those responsible for ethnic cleansing should be held accountable and that those who consider rape just another tactic of war should answer for their crimes. We have built a growing world economy in which those with modern skills and available capital have done very well. We could stop there. Instead, we are pursuing a broader prosperity in which those entrapped by poverty and discrimination are empowered to share, and in which every democracy on every continent will be included. So that's interesting. We have just a lot of overall diction and pathos included in those three paragraphs, that sequence there. In our lifetimes, we have seen enormous advances in the status of women. We could now lower our voices and, as some suggest, sit sedately down. Obviously, some negative diction there, which tells us she's not going to encourage that. And look, we could instead, it does continue. Instead, women everywhere, whether bumping against a glass ceiling or rising from a dirt floor, are standing up, spreading the word that we are ready to claim our rightful place as full citizens and full participants in every society on earth. So let's look at something structurally, because we haven't talked too much about structure. I would say we have a bit of a conversational tone. It's not super formal. It's not terribly informal, but it's just a very relaxed tone to draw her audience in. But we have this really broad opening as a nation, and then we're listing everything that our nation has done. And then here, we're actually going to switch to focusing specifically on one part of that nation, and the focus is on women now. All right, and let's see how that continues. Mount Holyoke is the home, to borrow Wendy Wasserstein's phrase, of uncommon women. But we know that there are uncommon women in all corners of the globe. In recent years, I have met in Sarajevo with women weighted down by personal grief, reaching out across ethnic lines to rebuild their shattered society. A lot of alliteration there. In Burundi, I have seen women taking the lead in efforts to avoid the fate of neighboring Rwanda, where violence left 3/4 of the population female and 1/2 of the women widows. In Guatemala, I have talked to women striving to ensure that their new peace endures and is accompanied by justice and an end to discrimination and abuse. And in Burma, I have met with a remarkable woman named Aung San Suu Kyi, who risks her life every day to keep alive the hope for democracy in her country. Now, this is interesting. We're back to cataloging or listing. And the listing of global places, we're doing that to show that we have these brave women who are everywhere. They're not just in one spot. It is an international sort of appeal. And it's also an anecdote, okay? So we're gonna put women all over equal brave. And then this is all anecdotal evidence. And of course, anecdote is going to pair with ethos because she's demonstrating her credibility to speak to women about the power of choice and to be brave and to kind of rise up and do what's right. So I'm just going to put ethos down here. So really, there's so much here. Do you have the time in 5 to 8 minutes to go to this extent? No. But what you should be doing is looking at what we are finding, and that's going to become second nature to you. The more that you practice, the more you are familiar with these devices, the easier it's going to be for you when you take the actual AP, because you're going to recognize these things immediately. And where I have all of these things written here, your actual paper might say list, juxtaposition, good versus bad. It could be very simplistic as long as it works for you and it helps you determine what rhetorical devices or appeals you might write about. Okay, so we're just going to move right along. And let's continue. These women have in common a determination to chart their own path, and by doing so to alter for the better the course of their country or community. Each has suffered blows, but each has proceeded with courage. Each has persevered. So definitely the repetition of each there, and we end with how they've persevered. As you go along your own road in life, you will, if you aim high enough, also meet resistance. For as Robert Kennedy once said, if there's nobody in your way, it's because you're not going anywhere. Definitely some ethos there. But no matter how tough the opposition may seem, have courage still and persevere. That's the second time we've seen that word. There is no doubt if you aim high enough that you will be confronted by those who say that your efforts to change the world or improve the lot of those around you do not mean much in the grand scheme of things. But no matter how impotent you may sometimes feel, have courage still and persevere. It is certain if you aim high enough that you will find your strongest beliefs ridiculed and challenged. Principles that you cherish may be derisively dismissed by those claiming to be more practical or realistic than you. But no matter how weary you may have become in persuading others to see the value in what you value, have courage still and persevere. Okay, so really the entire phrase. This would be repetition. If you've learned the word epistrophe, then you could use that. That's just repetition at the end of lines or stanzas or paragraphs. Inevitably, if you aim high enough, you will be buffeted by demands of family, friends, and employment that will conspire to distract you from your course. But no matter how difficult it may be to meet the commitments you have made, have courage still and persevere. It has been said that all work that is worth anything is done in faith. Okay, let's pause there for just a minute because there are a few things that we want to note here. These openings all present like miniature counter arguments, basically obstacles that women might face that might distract them from their course. The other thing that I want to do is note something structurally again. We have here shifted focus on the individual. So if you were in fact chunking, or if you were looking at the structural aspect of rhetoric, you would notice that we went from a very broad audience to a more focused audience of women, and then we narrow it to the individual, which would be each woman of this graduating class. And it's a really good way of having this sort of deductive plea that leads to her message, which is here. And hopefully you're starting to infer what the message will be, but let's hold off on that for just a moment. Let's see. This morning in these beautiful surroundings, so we bring it back to the present, okay, to the right now. In these beautiful surroundings at this celebration of warm memory and high expectation, I summon you in the name of this historic college and of all who have passed through its halls to embrace the faith that your courage and your perseverance will make a difference, and that every life enriched by your giving, every friend touched by your affection, every soul inspired by your passion, and every barrier to justice brought down by your determination will ennoble your own life, inspire others, serve your community, and explode outward the boundaries of what is achievable on this earth. So lots of parallelism and repetition here, okay? Okay. Let's go ahead and think of how we might want to respond to this essay. You have so many things from which to choose. The first thing is we have to figure out the message. The central message, I'm just going to put CM. Go forth and serve others / persevere. Okay, no matter who or what tries to get in your way, you have to do something that is going to better the course of the country or community. So there's our purpose there, just like all these other women that she's made mention of, okay? Okay, so there are a variety of ideas that you might want to pursue. Maybe you're going to look at the structure, the way that she really starts with the broad and gets to the very specific to address each individual woman. Maybe you look at the way that she unites women as a whole, as these global beings who are courageous and who fight against tyranny and oppression and all that's wrong. Certainly do that. Maybe you want to focus on some of the rhetorical devices or an appeal in general. For my working thesis, I think what I'm going to look at will be her use of juxtaposition with her appeal to ethos, including her own anecdotes. And the anecdotes is where I'm going to focus on her listing, her cataloging all these women, the global experiences, to bring it right back to the graduating class. So I'm going to say that, let's say, to encourage Mount Holyoke's, I'm just going to put MH, Mount Holyoke's graduating class, that they must be courageous and tenacious in their lives. And I might refine that to say in their fight to improve their communities, you know, something like that. Madeleine Albright, and just using abbreviations, uses juxtaposition and appeal to ethos. Including her anecdotes as former Secretary of State. So there we go. I've got some ideas. I think that I'll have juxtaposition as one body paragraph. I will likely combine ethos with the anecdotes in the second body paragraph. And I should be looking for counter argument that I can put in either paragraph or frankly both paragraphs. It doesn't hurt to have more than one acknowledgement of a counter. Now, my body paragraph number 1 is going to focus on the use of the juxtaposition. And really, I'm focusing on the contrast because her opening starts with, you can choose courage or you can choose complacency. So I'm going to look at that diction, and I'm going to talk about how she opens with the challenge of choosing courage versus complacency. And then I'm going to go on and talk about how she uses this idea of choice to demonstrate that we as human beings, we as a nation, we could choose essentially the easy route versus the instead choosing the morally right route, okay? Line 75 and 81, like those, if we go back, take a quick look. Oop, I went too far. So 75 and 81 here, it's this idea of contrasting the counter argument within her own argument, like, hey, there might be a problem, maybe not. You just have to know that you're going to meet with resistance and overcome. I don't know for sure that I'm going to include this here, but I'm just going to jot it down. So meet resistance / persevere. Okay, so there we go. Just some ideas for that juxtaposition paragraph. Now, my body paragraph number 2 is really going to be focused on the ethos. We might say that to establish credibility, she's citing historical evidence, right? The Berlin Wall, the nuclear arms, the fighting in Bosnia, things like that. And then she is also using her own anecdotes of her global experience. And that's going to show the global strength of women, which she then will focus into the individual strength of women. Okay, just some ideas there. Now, if I were looking for a place to put one of my counter arguments, I think one of the things I would do for my ethos paragraph, I think I would start by talking about, like, we cite all of this historical evidence to demonstrate the need to be courageous, but that scope might be too big. So counter argument, scope might be too broad because we're talking about America. But here's where I'm going to go against this. I'm going to say her use of anecdote personalizes her message. Might also say it allows her to direct the message towards her all-female audience, because remember, Mount Holyoke is a women's college. I might even use this counter argument rebuttal statement as a topic sentence for my paragraph on ethos. It really is up to me how I want to use that, but this is my idea going into it, that, hey, I want to talk about the fact that she uses historical evidence, she uses anecdotal evidence, and though initially the scope seems too big because she's citing all of these times in which the country of America had to make a difficult choice, it might seem too broad. However, she immediately counters that broadness with a more personalized list of anecdotes to personalize her message and make it more either directly influential or accessible to her all-female audience. All right? Okay, so remember, you've got this. When you write your conclusion, folks, I don't often jot the conclusion down because the conclusion need only be brief, and the conclusion is a restatement of your position and the so what. Okay, so let's just, this is, if you go back to the intro videos, this is where we really talked about this. The so what is basically, so why did her speech matter? Why was her strong use of rhetorical devices important? Because it could be something like this. Her speech, you know, the way that she writes her speech is so significant, or the fact that she writes a powerful speech to this graduating class is significant because it may empower a whole new generation of women leaders in our world, something like that. Okay? All right, you have your information, you have your planning. Good luck.